They told me the dead don't breathe, but beneath St. Peter's, I heard them inhale through the stone. My name is Raffaele Bianchi, and for 17 years I have tended to the deceased within the walls of Vatican City. My title is Preparator of the Holy Dead, though it is rarely written or spoken aloud. Fewer than a dozen of us have ever held it. Our work is not discussed in the open corridors of the Curia. It is done beneath marble and candlelight, where the floor tilts downward and clocks do not chime. I was assigned in the spring of 2008 to a subchamber 3 levels beneath the chapel of the choir. The chamber has no official designation, though it is referred to internally as Repository Novem, the 9th repository. No windows, no visible door from the outside. Access is granted through a mechanical lift operated by a copper key, one of only 3 still in circulation. I was never told who held the other 2. My instructions were plain: cleanse, preserve, and prepare the bodies of unnamed clergy who died while in service, those whose records had been sealed or erased. I was to perform rites privately. The priests who arrived on stretchers bore no identification, only linen tags with Roman numerals 4, 12, 32. I asked once what the numbers meant. The man delivering the body did not answer. He only whispered, "They do not belong to this diocese anymore." I began to pray more fervently than I had in my youth. The chamber was long and narrow, with a curved ceiling like a cistern. Bronze wall sconces held beeswax candles that never seemed to fully melt. The ventilation, I was told, was passive. Yet the air inside moved oddly, neither stale nor fresh, but pulsing, as if responding to my breath. I could feel it when I knelt. It brushed my skin in the opposite rhythm of my own inhale. Each night before preparation, I read the Benedictio Mortuorum, followed by the private mortician's psalm, handwritten by Cardinal St. Elmo in the year 1744. It is not part of the official liturgy. I was instructed never to recite it outside the chamber. I kept it folded in my pocket like a blade. The first time I noticed the breathing was on the 12th night. I had just finished wrapping a frail man marked 7th, whose mouth would not stay closed. I used thread and incense ash, as instructed, to seal it. As I turned to log the work, I heard a sigh not from him, but from behind me, from the wall. A slow, cavernous draw of air, like lungs filling after long stillness. I touched the stone. It was cool, but not dead. Over the following weeks, the chamber began to feel less like a crypt and more like a womb. The walls no longer echoed. Sounds disappeared into them, as though absorbed. I would speak prayers aloud and not hear them finish. Once, I dropped a metal tool. It did not ring, it fell with a muted clink, and the silence that followed was too full, as if something had been awakened. I began leaving the psalms unfinished. It felt wrong to complete them. There were protocols for everything. When a body arrived with open eyes, I was to close them with obsidian discs and a drop of myrrh. If the palms were turned inward, I was to whisper, "Non avertet faciem tuam." If a tongue protruded, I had to clip a white thread around the wrist before beginning any cleaning. One night, I received a body marked only with a red circle. No number, no linen. The priest delivering it refused to enter the chamber, setting the stretcher just outside the lift and backing away without a word. The man's cassock was soaked with dark water. I touched it and smelled salt. I prepared the red-marked priest like the others, but his skin resisted the oil. It seemed to repel every anointing, like wax that refused flame. When I covered his face with the linen shroud, I felt that familiar breath again, but closer now. It passed between my fingers. Not air, presence. I reported the anomaly to Monsignor Castelli the next morning. He nodded, took the report, and sealed it with a copper pin. "You are doing well," he said, "and seeing what you are meant to see. Do not seek more than what has been assigned to your hands." In the second winter of my assignment, I began to hear the breathing even before I entered the chamber. It was no longer subtle. The lift would descend, and before the doors opened, I could hear the slow, cyclical, inhalant, mechanical, not human, but deeply patient. It no longer frightened me. It anticipated me, welcomed me. Then came the night of the unlabeled delivery. There was no call, no schedule, no linen, no priest, only a plain black box in the lift, with no ornament, no hinges, no seal. I stood staring at it for minutes, before lifting the lid. Inside was a cassock, neatly folded, nothing more. The chamber began to feel smaller. I placed the cassock on the marble table. As I did, one of the candles extinguished without sound. Its flame simply ceased to be. I relit it. It went out again. I did not pray that night. I watched the cassock. I did not touch it. At 3:17 in the morning an hour, I had come to dread the walls inhaled. Not a sigh, a full, corporeal breath, deep and claiming. And then, from behind me, a voice I had never heard, low and scraping like dust. "You are last, Raffaele." I turned. No one. The cassock was gone. In its place lay my own burial garments, folded exactly as I had done for the others. My name was stitched on the collar, Bianchi, Raffaele, number 42. I fell to my knees. The candle flames bent inward. The chamber exhaled. I still worked beneath the basilica, though no longer in the 9th repository. They said my assignment was complete. The key was taken from me. I asked where the chamber had gone. "There is no such place," the Monsignor said gently, "and if there were, it breathes only for the unnamed." I now tend to the reliquaries, bones that do not speak, stones that do not shift. Sometimes, when I walk past the service lift near the archives, I feel it tremble at my presence like lungs holding breath. They do not assign numbers anymore, only names, and I have already seen mine. We are never to use the copper key unless commanded by liturgical necessity. I never touched it until the lock turned without me. My name is Enzo Varela. I serve as one of 3 appointed morticians under the Sacra Congregatio Pro Culto Divino, the Congregation for Divine Worship. My duties are quiet, methodical, and deeply reverend-tending to the bodies of deceased clergy within the inner sanctums of the Vatican. I work mostly in the Camera Sepulchri, an underground mortuary beneath the Apostolic Palace, tiled with marble that never grows cold and sealed with walls that let in no noise from the world above. Every drawer in the chamber is assigned. Each has a code etched in Latin, identifying the cleric it once held. Some drawers are frequently opened, emptied, and prepared for new arrivals. Others, particularly those toward the northern wall, have not been opened in centuries. One drawer, in particular, is marked with a red wax sigil and no name. Its lock is unlike the others, a curved copper mechanism that requires a key kept under dual seal in the reliquary vault. That key is known as Clavis Cassianithae, Key of Cassian. According to protocol, it may only be used in the case of a liturgical emergency. What constitutes such an emergency is never defined. I have seen the key once in 10 years. It was shown to me during my initiation in the year 2014. They placed it in my palm for exactly 5 seconds before locking it away again. "It is not to be used," the supervising priest whispered, "only accepted if it chooses to turn." I thought little of that phrase until the night it did. It began subtly, as these things often do. A candle flickered out during evening prayers. Though there was no draft, one of the drawers slid 2 inches ajar when my back was turned. The refrigeration system, though fully intact, began emitting a high, almost harmonic hum. I kept to my duties. Morticians are trained to hold silence, especially in the presence of anomalies. But on the 26th night of Lent, I noticed something impossible. The copper key was no longer in the reliquary vault. The sealed case that housed it was undisturbed still, locked, uncracked but empty. I reported the absence to Father Micali, who oversees the mortuary. He stared at me a moment too long before answering. "Keys return," he said simply. "What matters is who finds them." I didn't sleep that night. I returned to the chamber early, well before dawn. When I stepped inside, I found the drawer with the copper lock faintly ajar, no more than a finger's width. The air around it was warmer than the rest of the room. And resting just beneath the lip of the drawer was the copper key itself, upright on the stone, as if it had been placed there gently, deliberately, by an unseen hand. I should have sealed the drawer again. I should have alerted the curia. But the key was already inside the lock. The copper turned easily. There was no grinding, no resistance, only a smooth rotation, followed by a soft click I felt in my teeth more than I heard. I held my breath and pulled the drawer open. Inside was a body wrapped in white cloth, its face exposed. A man, perhaps in his early 50s. His skin was olive and unmarked by age. His eyes were closed, his hands resting neatly over his chest in the traditional clerical repose. A small crucifix lay between his fingers, worn smooth by Timur, perhaps by prayer. The linen around him bore no dust, no scent of decay. His chest rose. I stepped back, waited. It did not rise again. I checked the temperature of the chamber. 17 degrees Celsius. I ran a cloth over his forehead. It came away damp. According to the drawer's ledger, this chamber had not been opened since the year 1629. The entry listed only 2 words: Cassianus Ignatus Cassian, the unknown. I examined the body more closely. The fingernails were clean, clipped. His lips bore the faint pink of blood still circulating, though there was no heartbeat. I reached for the sacramental oil, and as I did, the man's left eye fluttered open. Just once, no movement followed, no breath. But I saw it, and I heard something else then low, like someone whispering through stone. Do not anoint what was not buried. I shut the drawer, but it did not seal. The copper key resisted my hand, turning in reverse. The drawer slid open another inch, unbidden. This time, I saw that the man's chest bore a faint, dark mark beneath the fabric. I lifted the linen slightly and saw what looked like a brand sigil I could not read, though it burned faintly against the flesh, pulsing like a second heart. The crucifix between his fingers had changed. It was no longer polished but blackened, as if left in smoke. I reached out and, though I cannot say why, touched it. The chamber lights flickered, and every candle extinguished simultaneously. A pressure filled the room, not air presence. I knelt, instinctively, whispering the psalm of final unbinding, though I had not used it in years. Then came the voice. Not aloud, not in my ears, in the bones of the room itself. He was never declared dead, therefore you have called him back. I do not know how long I remained there. When I stood, the body was no longer still. The man Cassian was sitting upright. His eyes were open now, not blinking, not seeing, just open. He looked through me and past me, as if remembering something from a time before burial. Then he smiled. It was not cruel, it was not kind, it was recognition. I closed the drawer with shaking hands. This time, the copper key sealed it. I did not anoint him. I did not perform the rites. I left the crucifix where it was. I turned out the lights and walked backward from the room. When I reached the lift, the key was once again in my pocket. I submitted no report. Father Mikali never asked for one. But since that night, there is a new entry in the drawer ledger. Cassianus Ignotus, interim. Not deceased, not interred, only interim. I pass the drawer each week during my rounds. The copper key remains in my coat, though I never reach for it. Once, last month, I saw a priest I did not recognize walking near the reliquary corridor. He was smiling faintly, as if hearing something private. His cassock was older than regulation. 16th century, I believe. He nodded at me as he passed. I did not nod back. I now understand why the key is called the Key of St. Cassian. Because if he was never buried, then perhaps he never truly died. And if that is true, then the drawer is not a tomb. It is a door. We keep no bell in the mortuary, and yet at precisely 3:17 each morning that week, one rang. On the 7th night, I followed it. My name is Father Lucio Ferri. I am a priest by ordination and a mortician by assignment. Since the year 2011, I have served in the Sacristy of the Deaden, unofficial title for a very official place, hidden 5 levels beneath the papal sacristy. Here, rites are performed for those clergy whose bodies require discretion. No photographs, no names, only solemnity. The chamber itself is small. Stone walls, no windows. A single entrance stele, locked by code and cross. There are no clocks, only the slow drip of time measured by candle wax and the hum of refrigerated drawers. I often lose track of the hour. That, too, is by design. My duties are fixed and humble. I prepare bodies for interment or further study, depending on the decree issued by the Office of Liturgical Integrity. Some arrive with names, most do not. Each drawer is labeled in Latin numerals. I record the rites in red ink, kept in a bound ledger that never leaves the chamber. And while I have seen many strange things beneath the basilica wounds that will not close, rosaries that leave ash behind, nothing unsettled me like the sound that began on the Monday after Pentecost. It was a bell, clear, small, perfect in pitch, and it rang once exactly at 3:17 in the morning. I assumed it was a fault in the ventilation system, perhaps a valve releasing. But when I reported it to Brother Anselmo, the engineer assigned to our floor, he gave a measured nod and said only, "The chamber is sealed, Father. There are no mechanisms that chime." The next night, I returned to my vigil. I made a point to stay late, completing the oiling of Father Maduro's joints, a minor bishop whose arms had stiffened into a cross. I kept my watch before me, the analog kind. At 3:17, the bell rang again. Once. Then silence. I stood still for nearly an hour afterward. Nothing stirred, but something had changed. The drawer labeled 16th, which I had personally sealed earlier that day, now sat open half an inch. I did not speak of it. I simply reclosed the drawer and noted the discrepancy in the log without comment. But it did not stop. Every night, exactly at 3:17, the bell rang. And each night after, a small change occurred. A candle bent in on itself. A cross shifted. The drawer is always the drawer opened just slightly, then closed again the moment my eyes moved. On the 6th night, the bell rang 3 times. That was the night I began to pray aloud during my work. I do not typically do so. My hands have always known the rituals better than my voice. But I found myself whispering the Commendatio Animae, not to the dead in my care, but to the chamber itself. The Vatican teaches restraint, reverence. We are to dismiss unverified experiences as testings of spirit. But there was nothing vague about what I saw next. As I polished a crucifix from drawer 8, my candlelight bent, not flickered, but bent, as if drawn toward the far wall. It stretched until its flame elongated like a finger. The air smelled not of wax, but incense, old incense, faint and bitter. That wall-plane stone, for as long as I have served now, bore a faint outline, a rectangle, a door not marked in blueprints, a mortuary slot I had never opened. It was slightly ajar, just like the others had been. On it, written in faint, almost luminous Latin script, was my name, Lucius Ferri, Obitus, in nocte tertia, date of death, in the 3rd night. I ran. I did not log the drawer. I did not extinguish the candles. I left the chamber open, a violation of protocol, but I could not remain. I did not return the next night, but the bell found me. I awoke at exactly 3:17, in my quarters beside the sacristy. No clocks chimed, no doors opened, but the bell rang once inside my room. A clear, ecclesiastical tone, not angry, simply present. I dressed, I crossed myself, and I returned to the mortuary. The chamber was dark, candles extinguished, but not cold. The air had weight. The crucifix on the wall tilted leftward, and the drawer was now fully extended. Inside, a coffin, ornate but worn, old wood banded in iron. On the lid, carved in shallow relief, Ferri, Lucius, Anima Sub Custodia. the sole under guard. I stood there a long while. My fingers hovered over the edge, unsure whether to lift the lid. But then I saw etched on the underside of the drawer, barely visible in the stone. If you see it open, it is not yet yours. Something stirred inside the coffin. Not a full motion, just a shifting, a breather, the memory of one. The bell rang a third time. I closed the drawer. It resisted. Only after I whispered the final lines of the burial rite, in Paradisum deducent te angeli, did it slide back in, smooth and slow. The bell has not rung since. I resumed my duties. I log each drawer with care. Drawer 25 remains unlisted, unspoken, though I pass it every day. Its seams are flush now. The name has faded. Brother Anselmo never asked what happened that week, but this morning, as he passed me in the corridor, he placed something in my hand without a word. A small brass clapper, no bell, just the part that rings. It was warm, and when I looked down, I noticed the same words etched faintly into its curve. If you see it open, it is not yet yours. We are not permitted to write in the ledger without direct authorization, and never under any condition should we sign what has not yet occurred. My name is Giulio Marchetti. I am one of 3 morticians assigned to the Holy See's inner mortuary, a stone-bound complex beneath the archival basilica. You will not find it on any map. Access is granted by sigil, not by key, and only to those of us who have taken the mortuary of Otuma vow of silence, precision, and obedience concerning all Vatican dead. Most who die within these walls are buried with public ceremony, but not all. There are certain clergy whose records are sealed, whose deaths are not acknowledged, and whose bodies are sent down to us for preparation and silent interment. We do not ask why. We do not linger. We catalog, we cleanse, we seal, and we record each burial manually, by candle-lighten the shrouded ledger. The ledger is bound in black calfskin, older than even the oldest of us. It rests in a glass case inside chamber 2, and only the mortician on duty may write in it. The ink is specially prepared by the apostolic chemists, ground from myrrh, bone ash, and clove oil. Once dried, it cannot be altered. Once signed, it is ecclesiastically permanent. I have served for 19 years. My hand is steady, and I have never made a mistake. Until last Tuesday. It was the 3rd hour of night 3, 17 a.m., when I returned to the ledger chamber after a routine cleansing. A simple interment, unnamed, mid-70s, cardinal's vestments. No abnormalities. But as I passed through the chamber door, the scent of the room caught me. The candlelight had shifted. The flames leaned away from the ledger case, as if it exhaled something foul. And I swear upon the sacred bones of St. Agnes, the glass had fogged from the inside. That should be impossible. The case is airtight. I approached, assuming perhaps a hairline crack, a pressure shift, anything to explain it. But no, the seals were intact. And then I saw it. An entry written in the familiar ink. Clean. Correct. Perfectly within protocol. Date of interment. Friday, the 7th of August, 2025. Name, confidential. Clergy classification, class red, sealed identity. Prepared by Giulio Marchetti. Signed, signature mine, undeniably mine. I froze. My hands went cold. I checked the date again. It was Tuesday, the 29th of July. This entry should not exist. I had not signed this. I would not have signed something I hadn't done. I stared at the page. The ink, long dried, dark, and final. I tried to open the glass case, but it would not budge. It is never locked, only sealed. I reported nothing. At dawn, I submitted my candle and robes for purification, as usual, but I did not sleep. That night, I returned to the chamber alone. Protocol requires a second mortician present when handling the ledger, but I had memorized the schedule. Brother Matteo would be in chamber 5 until lauds. I brought with me a fresh strip of linen, a vial of the sanctified ink, and my candle. When I arrived, the ledger was open to that same future page. It had not moved since the previous night. I whispered the proper prayer and prepared a test marking, a line of ink near the corner margin. Just a simple line, nothing sacred. The ink vanished. Not faded vanished. It didn't bleed or blot. It simply absorbed into the page and left no trace behind. That parchment had already been sealed by something, some force. And then the candle flickered violently, and I heard it, a sound like slow writing. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I turned sharply, but no one was there. The sound was coming from beneath the floor. Chamber 2 has no lower vault. It is the lowest. Still, the scratching continued. I knelt, pressing my ear to the cold flagstone. The sound grew clearer, as though a stylus etched into stone. Then silence. Then, my name, whispered. Giulio. Not shouted, not called, just spoken, close to my ear, the same voice I used to give final rites. I left immediately, nearly dropping the candle. As I walked through the corridor, every door I passed was closed except Chamber 6, which should have been locked for restoration. Inside, I saw nothing, just shadows, but the faint scent of myrrh was overwhelming, and I could hear breathing, slow, rhythmic, waiting. By the 5th night, I stopped trying to sleep. I studied past entries in the ledger, going back decades. I found odditizias, subtle ones, future dates, backdated signatures, all corrected later with red tape or crossed out by unnamed archivists. But one page, dated March of 2003, held something I hadn't seen before. The name Giulio Marchetti. I was 32 in 2003, still working in local Roman parishes. I had not even joined the Vatican Mortuary by then. And yet there it was, my name, my future title, my eventual signature. Above it, a short note in faded red ink. Let it happen. The ledger corrects what time denies. The next night, I waited until 3:17. I brought the ledger to Chamber 1, against every rule. I placed it on the embalming slab. I lit all 4 mortuary candles. And I waited. At exactly the marked hour, the candles dimmed not from lack of air, but as if something darker pulled their light inward. The room grew heavy, and I felt the floor below me stir. The slab shifted, ever so slightly, and then the drawer beneath it creaked open. Inside lay a corpse I had never seen before. But I recognized the clothing, the precise cassock and sash I wore nightly. The rosary knotted in the same strange loop I always tied. And the hands, the left pinky bore the small scar I got from a chalice in 2011. It was me, eyes closed, perfectly preserved, as if sleeping. And beside the body, tucked against the inner lining of the drawer, was a strip of calfskin parchment, unlined, signed, prepared by Giulio Marchetti. I do not remember writing it, but it was mine. The drawer closed itself, and the candles extinguished all at once. I have not spoken of this to the others. I continue my duties. Each night, I check the ledger. The page for August 7th remains unchanged. My signature remains. I have taken to preparing my own embalming materials, carefully, reverently, as if for someone else. The process steadies me. Some nights, I return to Chamber 6. The door is always open now. The scent of myrrh lingers. The breathing never stops. Yesterday, a new vial of ink arrived from the apostolic chemists. No request was submitted. Taped to its cork was a red tag bearing 2 words. For Giulio. I have placed it beside the ledger. I do not fear what is coming. The ledger is not a prophecy. It is a correction. It aligns the body with the truth. Whatever writes beneath its pages does not ask for consent, only for accuracy and obedience. I will not fight it. At the hour of my own preparation, I will do as I have done for others. I will clean the skin with warm water and oil. I will sew the lips with sacred thread. I will close the eyes. And when the ink dries on that final page, I will rest. We are forbidden to break the wire that seals their jaws. Not for embalming, not for prayer, not even for autopsy. My name is Brother Pietro Calvi. I tend the dead beneath the Vatican. Not in the ceremonial sense, no white robes or incense bowls, but in the quiet rituals of cleaning, preserving, and dressing the bodies of those who have served holy office and now return to sacred soil. My hands have sealed the eyelids of cardinals, arranged the fingers of papal advisors, and carried prelates through marble corridors unseen by the living. Our mortuary lies beneath the apostolic palace, beyond the crypts open to pilgrims. Room 4, we call it, though there is no room 3. There never was. The hallway to room 4 is locked with a copper turnkey, handed down through 6 generations of us, the order of silent burial. I inherited the duty in 2009. It is not a job anyone applies for. You are called, or perhaps selected. I was 33, too old for altar, too young to retire. I had no family. I was fluent in silence. There is one room where we keep the papal dead before their final placement in the Vatican grottos. Its name is never spoken aloud, but among us it is called the Room of Closed Mouths. The bodies arrive already prepared in certain ways. The vestments are folded precisely, the eyelids taped but not sewn. And the mouths, that is the first thing I always notice, are sealed shut not with sutures or mortician's glue, but with wire. Thick, braided, too industrial for a facial cavity. Wrapped 4 times through the molars and tied behind the cranium. There are no instructions in the manuals, no sacramental reference. Only a note pinned to the robes, usually folded over itself and marked with a red wax seal. Do not remove. I asked once. Father Lucio, my predecessor, was still breathing then. He was polishing a chalice that hadn't been touched since 1962. Why are they wired so tightly? I asked. He stopped, cloth in hand, and stared into the reflection of the silver. To keep what's inside from speaking, he said, and returned to his polishing. I never asked again. Still, curiosity grows in quiet rooms. There were 12 of them when I first noticed a pattern. Not the wire, I had grown used to that, but the shape of the mouths beneath it. Some seemed bloated at the cheeks. Others pressed tightly as if resisting breath. One had the faintest bulge beneath the tongue. I pressed a gloved hand to the underside of that jaw. It pulsed not with life, but with air, like a lung long sealed. The formaldehyde had not reached the throat. I documented everything, quietly, never aloud. A copper ledger, my own hand, no digital scans. They kept coming. 2011. A deacon from the outer curia. Same wires. 2012. A monsignor. Lips blue from pressure. 2015. Archbishop Calvetti. I remember his name only because the red seal on his chest had cracked. That night after Calvetti, I awoke at 3:17 a.m. It is always 3:17. I had fallen asleep in the candle room, surrounded by unused thuribles and cloths for anointing. The hallway outside was colder than it should have been. The mortuary doors were locked. I had made sure of it. But the light above room 4 was on. No one turns that light on. It only responds to the copper key. And that key hung around my neck. I went to the door. The air hummed. The silence inside was not the silence of rest. It was the silence of waiting. 12 bodies, all laid out, mouths wired shut, except one. The wire lay coiled on the floor like a serpent. No hand had touched it, not mine, not the assistant's. The jaw of the corpse hung open, but I could not see inside. It was dark, darker than the room around it, a shadow that swallowed the throat. I approached with a sterile hook. I have done countless oral inspections. There should have been nothing unusual, but my hand trembled. As the hook reached the lips, the corpse exhaled. No lungs, no diaphragm, but the air rushed past me sweet at first, then sick. It smelled like burned scripture. I staggered back. The candles flickered. One burst entirely, and then I heard it. Latin not spoken, but breathed. Not De Profundis or Requiem Aeternam, but something older, something before the Mass. I fled the room. I locked it twice. I called no one. The next morning I returned. The wire was back in place, tighter than before, almost fused to the bone. I examined the other corpses. Each had bled from the gums overnight, faint but fresh. I told myself it had been a dream, but the copper ledger bore a new entry, in my own hand. Do not listen when the dead begin to breathe. I had not written that, at least not consciously. Weeks passed. No new corpses. The light above room 4 stayed off. Until one day, Father Lucio returned. He had not been seen in years, not reassigned, not buried, simply absent. He stood in the threshold of room 4 without knocking. His eyes were not his own, not empty, but overfull, like a chalice trembling with some unspoken fluid. I broke the wire once too, he said. You never really sleep again, do you? I asked him what it was, what lived behind the teeth. He said only this. When the holy lose their way, the silence has to go somewhere. The church hides its sins in flesh. He handed me a new spool of wire, thicker, rust-colored. Use this from now on. You'll see why. And he left, barefoot, into the crypt corridor. I never saw him again. I no longer sleep in the candle room. I say prayers without moving my lips. I wire each jaw myself. 3 turns, then 4, then a cross-binding at the chin. The Vatican will not acknowledge this method, but they send no one to stop me. The copper key grows warmer with each passing month. Sometimes, when I pass room 4 at night, I hear the faintest hiss, not a voice, not quite, like breath through a needle, like confession forced through stone lips. We do not speak of what lies inside the mouths of the dead. We only seal, and seal, and seal. In the lower mortuary of the Vatican, we are instructed never to touch the unmarked slab in Vault Ninior, the candle that burns beside it. Yet the flame never dies, and the slab is not truly still. My name is Matteo Carusi, and for the past 12 years I have served as one of 4 Vatican Morticians entrusted with the preservation of clergy remains destined for sanctified interment. We are not priests, but our duties are sacred. Each night, I descend beneath the western wing of the Apostolic Palace to a vault few remember and fewer still are permitted to enter. The stairwell ends 53 steps below, where the walls change from limestone to something older, darker, and oddly smooth. The air shifts to thicker, as if exhaled from beneath. Most chambers are catalogued and named. Vault 7 holds relic priests in temporary repose. Vault 4 preserves bones transferred from desecrated ground. But Vault 9 bears no plaque. The brass numbering stops at 8. Only those of us with clearance from the Ufficio delle Reliquie know it exists. Its door is thick steel, curiously unsealed, no padlock, no electronic panel, just a smooth pull handle. The rule is simple. We may open it only during inspection week in October, and only in pairs. Otherwise, we pass it by, unless a candle burns inside. This too is in the guidelines. If Vault 9 is illuminated by flame, the designated mortician must document the time and duration without disturbing the source. I had never seen it lit before last winter. It was the second week of Advent, late December. Snow dusted the rooftops of Rome, and the halls above were filled with rehearsals for the Christmas vigil. Down below, in the silence of the mortuary, I prepared a bishop's body for repose in Vault 2. At 3:17 a.m., a time I only registered later, I noticed the soft glow from beneath Vault 9's threshold, a flickering halo, faint but unmistakable. I stepped closer. The handle was warm to the touch. I should have logged the anomaly and moved on, but something about the stillness compelled me. I cracked the door just slightly, enough to confirm what I feared. The chamber was dim, lit only by a single candle on a low iron stand beside the central slab. There were no markings on the candle, no wax spill, no source for ignition, and yet the flame burned steady, pale yellow, barely swaying despite the draft from the corridor. I closed the door and wrote the required entry into the nightly log. Vault 9, Flame observed, 3:17 until 4 o'clock, uninterrupted, no sound, no personnel inside. Over the next few nights the flame returned, always at 3:17, always extinguishing itself by 4. I began timing it, down to the second. 3 minutes, 17 seconds. Identical each night. I reported it as protocol dictated. No one responded. Then, on the 5th night, something changed. As I turned to leave the chamber, I noticed the flame flicker, not from air, but from movement. The unmarked, slab-simple stone, polished, smooth-shuttered faintly, just once, as if whatever lay beneath had adjusted its weight. I did not report the movement. To write it would be to admit I had stepped inside. Instead, I waited. Night after night, I watched through the slightly open door. The flame burned. The slab remained still. Until Christmas Eve. That night, Vatican City was near silent above. Midnight Mass was hours away, and most clergy had retreated to preparation or sleep. I descended alone, as scheduled, to complete my final duties for the night. Vault 9 was already lit. This time, the flame was not yellow, but a pale blue gold in color, but unnaturally bright. The candle's body had shortened, despite never dripping. The iron stand seemed warped, tilted slightly, as if the floor beneath had settled unevenly. And the slab was wet. Not visibly, not like spilled water, but a sheen had formed across its surface, like dew on stone. It reflected the flame. And as I stepped inside, yes, fully this time, I heard a faint hum, like the echo of Gregorian chant far underground. It wasn't music, exactly. It lacked rhythm, more like one long note held in 1,000 throats. No beginning, no end. Then the flame bent sideways, as if blown by breath, but the air was still. I reached out. I wanted to snuff the candle, to end the vigil I had not agreed to keep. But before my fingers touched it, the flame pulsed violently. It flared blue, impossibly high, and for an instant the walls looked alive like flesh illuminated beneath skin. The slab groaned, not metaphorically. A sound escaped it, a groan, something old, weighty, and shifting. I fled the chamber and locked myself in the embalming room until dawn. I tried to report the experience to Father Benchi, the overseer of post-mortem rites. He listened. He nodded. Then he told me to rest and added, Vault 9 requires reverence, not interpretation. When I returned the following night, Vault 9 was dark. I thought it was over. It wasn't. 3 nights later, the flame returned. This time, I entered without hesitation. The candle was blue again. The air smelled not of wax, but of incense and cold stone. The hum was louder. The slab, now visibly trembling, had cracked along one edge. A fine, white dust lined the floor. I don't know why I reached for the candle again. Perhaps I thought I could still end it, that if I pinched the wick, if I dared touch the unnatural flame, I could halt whatever ritual was unfolding. I did. My fingers touched the fire. It didn't burn. It entered me. Not heat, not pain, just a stillness. My breath paused. My pulse ceased. I was not dead, but no longer alone in my own body. I heard a voice-anot, with ears, but from inside. Do not cover what God has kept bare. And the slab moved. It slid half an inch aside, just enough to reveal that there was no coffin beneath, no recess, only depth. A shaft descending into blackness. The flame pulsed. The hum surged. I heard a second voice, this one my own, but I hadn't spoken. Then silence. The candle extinguished on its own, and the slab sealed shut. Since that night, the flame has not returned. Vault 9 remains dark. I no longer descend alone. My schedule has been altered. No reason given. But I dream of the slab, of a light beneath it, of breath without lungs, of something still stirring, not because it is alive, but because it never truly died. In the corner of the new mortuary logbook, beneath all official entries, someone has written a note in red ink. Should the candle return, do not extinguish. Only watch. It burns to warn, not to reveal. The ink is not my handwriting, but it is in my language, and the candle is my charge now. It always was. They tell us not to go near the mortuary wing after midnight, not because it's haunted, but because that's when the bodies are meant to rest undisturbed. My name is Father Adriano Solmi. I serve as one of the appointed morticians beneath the Vatican, assigned not only to prepare the departed clergy for burial, but also to safeguard the sanctity of the dead. We do not embalm in the modern sense. The rites we follow are older than most understand rituals handed down in handwritten Latin guides, stored beneath the Lateran sacristy. Our work is done below ground, beyond the reach of bells or daybreak, in corridors few ever walk. I was transferred to this role in the spring of 2023, after the sudden reassignment of Father Donato. No one spoke of his departure. His locker remained sealed. I took over his daily ledger and his route, preparing relic drawers, checking the integrity of the crypt seals, and tending to the remains of unnamed clergy kept in what they call the reserved wing. This particular wing had been shut since 1965. A note in my daily protocol described it simply as archived. It included an instruction I initially thought was a misprint. Never enter between the hours of 3 and 4 in the morning, even if summoned. I catalogued relics, most lying bones, finger fragments, scrapings from miters and chasubles. But every so often, I had to enter one of the other mortuary corridors and ensure humidity was controlled and seals remained intact. These were quiet, reverent tasks. Until one night, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the stone beyond the sealed wing. It was just after 3 in the morning, specifically 3:17. I remember this precisely because the candle on my workbench flickered blue. That only happens when a change in air pressure suggests an open chamber. I looked up from the ossuary box I was examining. The corridor outside was completely still, but I heard them slow, deliberate steps, one after the other, moving with weight and purpose. Not the soft echo of rats or the shifting creak of wood. These were footfalls. I stood and pressed the candle's brass holder shut, sheathing the flame. It was a foolish instinct, but one drilled into us. If the flame reacts without a source, do not let it burn freely. I followed the sound through the side corridor that led to the reserved wing. This passage had once been part of the original mortuary route, but it had been closed off with iron bars and bricked over decades ago. Or so I believed. The wall at the end of the corridor was gone. In its place stood an arched threshold, unlit but visibly open, and from within I saw the backs of 6 robed figures, hooded, silent. Each one bore a long object draped in black cloth coffins. No voices, no chants, just a procession in complete silence. The floor beneath them did not echo. I stood transfixed. They moved as though rehearsed, turning left through a deeper passage I had never seen. At the tail end of the procession, one hooded figure paused. Though his face was hidden, I knew Ifelth was watching me. My breath caught. I lowered my eyes, instinctively muttering a fragment of the psalm for the dead. But by the time I dared look up again, he had turned and continued walking. I remained rooted for minutes. Eventually, I backed away and returned to my office. I did not make note of the encounter in the ledger. Not yet. The next morning, I requested assistance from Brother Mattia, who worked in structural maintenance. I asked him, carefully, if there had been any recent work on the southern corridor. He frowned. That wing was sealed before my time, he said. There's brickwork behind the wall, solid. We did a resonance test 2 years ago. No cavities. But I insisted. So we went. Together, we walked down the same corridor. The candle I carried burned low and steady. No flicker, no chill. But when we arrived at the terminus of the hallway, what I saw stole the breath from my lungs. It was a solid wall. Not just a wall, freshly mortared. Smooth white stones. No archway. No threshold. No passage. Brother Mattia ran his hand across the surface. Told you, he muttered. I remained silent. I touched the mortar, still slightly damp. That night, I returned alone, my fingers trembling as I carried the candle. I lit it near the wall. The flame flickered not from wind, but in the unnatural, rhythmic way it does when presence moves nearby. Then it bent. The flame leaned toward the wall, not upward, not away, toward. I backed away. I did not light the candle again. Over the next 3 nights, the procession returned. Always at 3:17. Always in silence. Hooded figures. 6 of them, carrying coffins that did not touch the ground, gliding along by some unseen rhythm. At the end, the 7th figure, the one who had paused, would stop again, always in the same spot. I never saw his face, but each time, he tilted his head, as if listening. I stopped cataloging relics. I began mapping what I could of the corridor beyond when the arch appeared, sketching its geometry, marking symbols etched faintly into the stone sigils, resembling the ones used to seal excommunicated clergy. On the 4th night, I brought my old breviary and recited the prayers for the forgotten dead. When the procession appeared, I did not hide. I stood by the arch and watched. As the 6th coffin passed, I saw beneath the drape a pale hand, mummified, with a bishop's ring still affixed. The skin was too pristine, not bloated, not rotten, preserved by something that defied natural time. The 7th figure stopped, closer than before, within reach, and this time he extended a hand. It was gloved in thin white linen, as we use in preparation rites, but what disturbed me most was the gesture, a slow, open-palmed invitation come. I did not move, but I did speak. "I serve only the living rites," I whispered, "not the silent ones." He lowered his hand, and for the first time I heard a sound, a single word, rasped from behind the hood, Latin, old and brittle. Soon, the arch faded, the candle extinguished on its own. I fell to my knees. I never returned to the mortuary wing after that. 2 days later, I was transferred to external parochial duties. No explanation, no ceremony, just a new assignment and a sealed letter with a red stamped decreto interno, reassignato ad tempus. Brother Matthias swears the wall has never been touched. I believe him. But on my last day in the archives, I opened the ledger, passed down from Father Donato. Flipping to the final page, I found a single handwritten line in ink that shimmered faintly in the light. They process for those who will never be named. Below that, a list. The first few names were ancient Latinized, indistinct. The final one chilled my blood. Adriano Solmi. No date, just the name. I sealed the ledger and left it in the drawer where I found it. At night, sometimes in parish silence, I still hear the shuffling of robes. And once, in the shadows beyond the nave, I saw a figure watching hooded, unmoving. I did not go near. I did not speak. I simply whispered the same word back. Soon. They told me it held nothing but consecrated air sealed centuries ago, never to be opened, never to be disturbed. So why did it breathe? My name is Carlo Berti, mortician for the Vatican Mortuary beneath the Apostolic Palace. I do not speak of my work lightly, and certainly never publicly. Ours is a silence sanctioned by God and guarded by oath. The dead of this place are not ordinary. They are bishops without countries, clerics with no names, men who served the church in roles history does not acknowledge. Some have no records at all. Each is laid to rest with precise rites. I work in room 11, where temperature and humidity are monitored hourly, and the candles burn a special blend of beeswax and chrism. There are no windows here. The walls, marble-lined and grooved with vertical recesses, seem to pull sound inward. Nothing echoes, and yet you often feel as if something has just finished speaking. Among the relics and rites assigned to the deceased, there is one object we do not touch. It is kept behind a bronze lattice in a recessed niche to the left of the preparation table. We call it the air, though its official entry is more elaborate. Reliquary containing sanctified atmosphere. Sealed Anno Domini 1392. It looks like an ordinary vessel. Octagonal, glass-sided, capped in gilded bronze with 7 seals. Its base bears a Latin inscription so faded that even archivist Bianchi gave up trying to translate it in full. One line, however, remains legible. Non aperiatur donec de nuo insuffletur. Do not open until it breathes again. That line never meant much to me until last Tuesday. The protocol was simple. The air was not to be moved, touched, or inspected beyond the monthly visual check. I'd performed that check nearly 30 times in my tenure, always noting the same things. No cracks, seals intact, no signs of internal condensation. I would record no anomalies observed and return to the body before me. But last week, something changed. I was preparing the remains of a Spanish Monsignor, unnamed in our records but bearing a seal I recognized, red wax, stamped with the triple cross of the Congregation of Extraordinary Doctrine. It meant he had dealt with unspeakable things in life. His body came in a locked casket, which I was instructed to open only in the presence of lighted chrism candles. At 3:17 a.m., as prescribed, I lit the 4 candles around his table. That time 3:17 had recurred before in these vaults, usually associated with processions or bell anomalies, but this night I felt it more intimately. The moment I struck the 4th match, the reliquary sighed. Not a trick of pressure or airflow, a human sigh, warm, timed precisely with the ignition. I froze, the match still hissing in my fingers. The breath hadn't come from behind me, nor from the hallway. It had come from within the reliquary. I stepped closer, slowly. The air within it swirled, a barely visible distorsiones, though some internal pressure had shifted. The seals remained intact, yet the glass had fogged faintly, just once, from the inside. I leaned in and heard my own voice whisper, "Non andare, Carlo. Non ancora. Don't go, Carlo. Not yet." It was unmistakably Mabut, not as I am. It was my voice, at 6 years old. I did not finish preparing the Monsignor that night. I extinguished the candles, sealed the chamber, and submitted a partial log. Procedure interrupted due to equipment anomaly. Will resume under supervision. The next morning, I requested an audience with Father Lucio Ferri, one of the only clerics permitted in room 11 outside of mortuary staff. He nodded as I recounted the events. He did not ask me to explain further. "Have you fasted?" he asked. "No," I said. "You will. 3 days. Water only. Then you may return. I'll arrange for Father Solmi to monitor from above." No further explanation. No disbelief. The fast was grueling, not for hunger, but for what visited me in sleep. I dreamt of empty lungs expanding under marble lids, of whispered names spoken backward, of my childhood home but altered, wrong walls, wrong windows, and yet perfectly familiar. In every dream, I heard that same voice again, not mine anymore, younger, slower, like something learning how to speak. When I returned, room 11 had been rearranged. The reliquary now stood on a liturgical cushion atop a raised marble pedestal. The lattice was removed. No one had documented this. Next to it, I found an envelope unsealed, marked with a red symbol I'd never seen before. 3 nested spirals, almost like wind drawn in stone. Inside, a single line on plain parchment. "Breathe not upon it, lest it remember you." I wasn't sure if it was a warning or an instruction. That night, I performed the rites again. This time, I kept my distance from the reliquary. I did not lean close. I did not speak aloud. But it responded anyway. Every time I touched the Monsignor's body, cleaning the brow, arranging the hands, sealing the orifices, the reliquary pulsed. Not light, not vibration, something deeper, like a lung expanding with memory. 3 candles flickered inward. The 4th refused to stay lit. At 3:17, the reliquary exhaled again but louder. The fog on the glass lingered. This time, I didn't need to lean in. I heard the whisper clearly. "Open me." I backed away. My lips moved, but I hadn't spoken. I remember the taste of breath. It said this using my mouth. I fell to my knees, unable to scream. The reliquary glowed not light, but density. The air around it thickened. And within its sealed glass, a faint outline began to form. Not a body, but an impression, like something invisible pressing gently from within. It pulsed in time with my breath. I closed my eyes, prayed the rite of stillness, then silence. When I opened my eyes, the impression was gone. The reliquary once again held only air. Except it was not the same air. My breath steamed in the cold room, but the reliquary stayed warm. The next day, the pedestal was gone, the lattice replaced, no record of the envelope, and the Monsignor's casket had been taken sealed before I could finish. His face was still unwiped. His lips half parted. I was told he had been buried. No one mentioned what I saw. No one asked why the reliquary had been moved. I did not report the whispering. I have not fasted since. But I know the thing within the reliquary now remembers me. Every seventh night, when I walk past the bronze lattice, the seals fog, the air around it bends. And sometimes, when I forget myself and breathe too near, I feel something stir inside. Not malevolent, not holy, just waiting. I have stopped praying aloud in that room. Last week, a younger mortician asked why that reliquary matters if it holds nothing. I told him the truth as I understand it. Not everything sealed in glass is meant to be seen. Some things are remembered through breath alone. He laughed. But tonight, as I record this entry, I found his tools stacked wrong, his gloves placed in a perfect circle, and on the reliquary's glass, a single, clear imprint. A child's breath. The dead are not permitted to return to the archive specially, not while still warm. My name is Lorenzo De Luca. I am a mortician of the Holy See, assigned to the lowest tier of the papal mortuary beneath the basilica. My duties are procedural, quiet, and exacting. I prepare bodies for burial in accordance with canonical law, papal liturgy, and sacramental silence. Most who come to me arrive wrapped in white linen, tagged with a red stamp, and escorted by 2 guards who do not speak. We do not embalm in the traditional sense. We preserve what must be preserved, cleanse what must be cleansed, and anoint what must not be named. There are prayers known only to our order, murmured over every body, even if the tongue is stiff with age. I keep to my station. The mortuary is beneath the lower archives, far below the marble halls seen by tourists. Down here, the lights do not buzz. The air smells faintly of frankincense and old stone. We measure our time by ritual, not by clock. On the morning of Thursday, the 24th of October, 2024, I received a clearance slip, stamped with the Archivum Vetetum Sealone. I rarely see outside of sealed orders. It was handed to me by a woman in a charcoal robe, with a black rosary looped twice around her wrist. Her name, written in formal cursive at the bottom of the form, was Archivist Teresa Anselmi. I thanked her. She did not smile. At exactly 3:17 that night, a gurney was wheeled to my door. The body beneath the sheet had her face. It took me several long minutes before I peeled the linen back far enough to be sure. The jawline, the small mole beneath the left eye, even the trimmed gray hairs at her temple stone of it could be mistaken. The body belonged to Archivist Teresa Anselmi. But I had spoken to her that morning. She had signed my clearance. A wax envelope was clipped to the breast of her black clerical blouse, sealed in red. I did not open it. That was not my role. But my hand trembled slightly as I peeled back the rest of the sheet. Her skin was cool, not yet stiff, but unnaturally pale. Her hands were clasped in the sign of rest, fingers tucked precisely into one another, as we are trained to do after death. That's what disturbed me. She had been prepared, anointed, eyes closed, and lips touched with oil. I examined the rest of her quietly. Her clerical garments were fresh, uncreased, and slightly warm where they touched the folds of the linen. But her fingernails told a different story, blue at the base, skin beginning to sink around the knuckles. The death was not new. No signs of trauma. No sign at all of what had caused her to be brought here. The mortuary candles flickered. That was not unusual. Not entirely. The flames often react during a preparation sensitive, perhaps, to breath or thought or ritual. But these flames bent away from her, not flickering, not gusted, bowing, as if to avoid something in her presence. I began the standard rites. I lit the blessed incense, opened the psalter, and recited the mortuary litany. But as I reached the third stanza portion, invoking the saints of the crypt, the candle beside her went out entirely. I tried to relight it. My match burned blue, then black, and then dissolved as if wet. The air grew noticeably colder, not with breeze or draft, but with a pressure, like the inhalation of a chapel just before Mass. I continued the rite by memory, keeping my voice steady. Halfway through the psalm of entry, I noticed the smallest detail. Her lips were parted. They had been closed. I was certain of it. I paused, waited, listened, nothing. But the next time I looked, they were sealed again. I stepped back, crossed myself, and in that moment I remembered something deeper, something that should not have been possible. When Archivist Anselmi had handed me the clearance slip earlier that morning, she had worn white gloves. We are instructed not to question the gloves. Archivists from the forbidden stacks often wear them. But now I recalled something beneath the surface of that memoria detail I had overlooked. The gloves had been wet, dripping slightly, not with water, with ink. I moved around the table to gather the vial of chrism oil from the antechamber cabinet. When I returned, the wax envelope on her chest had unsealed itself. The red seal, imprinted with the symbol of the Vatican, lay broken on the floor. It had not fallen. It had been peeled away. I stared at it. Then, reluctantly, I lifted the envelope. Inside was a single folded page of parchment. No words were written, only lines, narrow, fine lines, etched in jet black ink. At first I thought them to be musical staves, but they did not curve or break. They crossed and overlapped each other with surgical precision. Then I saw it. The lines matched her fingerprint ridges exactly. Not in part and total, the parchment bore a full set of fingerprint patterns that mirrored the corpse's right hand. I dropped the page. My gloves were suddenly damp with sweat. From beneath the table, a sound emerged. It was not loud, not even distinct, but I had heard it once before when I was new to the mortuary. A guard had brought down the body of a priest from the upper sanctum, and as the candles were lit, we heard a whisper from his throat, a final breath escaping the vocal cords, some said. Others claimed it was the last confession, trying to flee. I heard that sound now. The body exhaled, once, then silence. I backed away. One of the sacramental bells on the upper shelf, the bell of dismissal, rung only after the rites rang by itself. 3 times. A pause. Then, once more. That sequence was not part of any rite I knew. The mouth opened again. This time the tongue moved. It did not speak, not exactly, but I saw the shape of a word form against the lips. My name. Lorenzo. I fled. I left the room lit. I left the book open. I left the body, the parchment, and the broken seal. I climbed the stairs toward the upper corridor. I made my way, half numb, toward the lower archive where I had seen her that morning. I needed confirmation, refutation, anything. But when I reached the archivist's level, a cordon had already been placed. 2 Swiss guards stood beside the entrance, stone-faced. Restricted due to reassignment, one of them said. To whom? I asked. Neither answered. I asked again. The second guard lifted a clipboard, checked the top page, then read aloud. Archivist Teresa Anselmi. Reassigned. Status in progress. He looked up at me with no recognition. Clearance revoked, sir. I returned to the mortuary just before dawn. The candles were still lit. The body was gone. Not removed, absent. There were no signs of gurney wheels, No scent of incense, no envelope, no parchment. Just the psalter still open to the psalm of entry. And beneath it, where the seal had fallen, a single white glove. The glove was damp, ink-stained, still warm. I said nothing. I closed the psalter, relit the candle, and began cleaning the table as per protocol. That evening, I received a new red-stamped folder on my work desk. No name, no time of arrival, no visible damage. Only a simple printed label, newly adhered. Archivum Vetitum de Luca Lorenzo. Clearance approved. And in the lower left corner, handwritten in black ink, one line, "Prepare thyself." I was told never to enter the Red Wing, not even to sweep. My name is Sister Valeria Conti, and I have served as mortician within the Vatican's lower sanctum since the spring of 2011. My duties are modest, reverent. The preparation of bodies before burial or relocation to the crypt is a task most preferred not to think about, but I have found peace in this quiet stewardship. We do not embalm. We cleanse, anoint, and wrap in linen. Our tools are brass and wood. Our prayers are whispered. The mortuary is a series of descending chambers beneath the apostolic palace. Each wing is named not by color, but by the hue of its walls at candlelight. The white wing is for the recently departed, the gray for transfer to ossuary records, and the black for sealed cases, requiring archival supervision. But the red wing has no official designation. I only learned its name from a passing phrase spoken by Father Orsini when I first arrived. He said it too casually, "No one goes red, ever." The hallway to the red wing is narrow and dustless. Its iron door bears no inscription, only a horizontal bar and a keyhole without a lock. I've passed it hundreds of times during evening rounds, candle in hand, muttering Psalm 90 as I checked temperatures and logged hour of rest. I never thought I would stop there, not until last Thursday. It began with a sound of scratching, faint like a pencil dragging across stone. I had finished my usual duties, verifying humidity in the black wing, trimming the vigil candles, noting the mild warping of drawer handles in Chamber 5. At 3:14 a.m., yes, I checked I heard it, soft and pulsed, like something testing a surface from the other side. I paused near the red wing. It was then I noticed the candles were not flickering as they should. The flame hovered, motionless, as if pressed under glass. The door to the red wing had no handle. I placed my hand on the cold surface enough to open it. Of course, only to still myself. The scratching ceased. I remained there longer than I meant to. Not afraid, not yet, but unsettled in a way I could not name. The sort of stillness you feel when someone kneels behind you in prayer, unseen. Later that morning, I found a smear beneath my fingernail, rust brown. I told myself it was wax, but I hadn't handled wax that night. For the next 2 nights, I lingered by the red wing without meaning to. Something in me felt tethered like a candle drawn to the scent of breath. On the 3rd night, the temperature in the outer chamber dropped to 6 degrees Celsius. That is well below protocol. The system has redundancies, and yet the readings held. Father Orsini did not respond to my report. That night, I returned early to check the gauges again. As I passed the red wing, my candle faltered, then flared brighter than I'd ever seen. Blue and wide at the base, like a breath had blown through it from the sealed door. And then I saw it. A panel of the red wing, small, rectangular, no larger than a clerical window, had fogged from the inside. Something had breathed. I approached with the quiet reverence one gives the Eucharist. Slowly, slowly, I stepped forward, holding the candle to the glass. There were marks. Thin, precise overlapping arcs, not clawing, not random, deliberate. A single fingernail dragged repeatedly in the shape of a crescent. I counted 11 crescents. Each seemed deeper than the last. I did not scream, but I did something worse. I leaned my ear against the glass, and I heard just for a moment the echo of breath. There are prayers reserved for the mortuary, short, sacred protections. We say them silently when cleansing the hands of the departed, when closing the jaw, when wrapping the eyes. But that night I said them aloud, all of them. Libera me, Domine, de morte aeterna. The following night, I requested Father Orsini's presence, citing anomalous condensation. He did not come. Instead, an envelope was left on my desk. No seal, no signature. Inside, a single instruction, handwritten in Latin. Do not look into the drawers. I did not plan to disobey. But on the fifth night, when the candle flared blue again and the glass shimmered with new Crescents 23 now, I noticed something else. The drawers inside the Red Wing, they had shifted. You must understand, Vatican mortuary drawers are not mobile. They are welded bronze. But I saw Itro 3, column 2 at a new angle, drawn out by an inch. By whom? By what? I found the old copper key buried at the back of a drawer in the Black Wing. I had seen Father Orsini use it once, in 2012. It trembled in my hand. I opened the Red Wing at 3:17 a.m. Inside, 13 glass drawers, no mistaking them now each, held a body, linen, wrapped, toes bound, jaw sealed. But the hands, the linen had torn from the inside, and their fingernails, they had grown, long, yellowed, curved like thorns, pressed to the glass, some curled over, some bent against the corners. Each nail carried the same deliberate arc crescent on crescent scraped deep into the glass from within. I stepped back. My candle dimmed. Behind me, a drawer slid closed on its own. Soft, mechanical, final. Then I heard the whisper. It came not from the corpses, but from above, from the ceiling vent, as if something watched from inside the walls. Valeria, it said. My name, spoken in a voice I have not heard since I was a child. It was my mother's. She died before I took my vows. The next evening, the Red Wing door was gone. I do not mean locked. I mean vanished. Where it once stood, there is now only wall perfectly white, unbroken. The hallway no longer aligns the same way. If I walk it, I arrive back at the chapel. Father Orsini has been reassigned. No notice, no forwarding office. There is now a line in my nightly log that I do not remember writing. It appears each morning, though I lock the cabinet. Red is sealed until the 12th crescent completes. No one else mentions it. The other sisters move with usual grace. The candle flames burn straight. And yet, when I walk the lower chambers alone, I hear it again. A scratch. A breath. A nail dragging patiently across glass. I still have that smear beneath my nail. I cannot wash it off. Last night, I dreamt I was inside one of those drawers. My hands were bound in linen, but my fingers moved freely, and when I reached up, I could feel the inside of the glass. Every mortuary door is sealed with a strip of consecrated wax bearing the signet of the office of the dead. Door 9 broke its seal on a night no one touched it, then sealed itself again by dawn. From the inside, I am Father Niccolo Riva, mortician and servant of the Papal Mortuary Office since the autumn of 2006. My duties are not those spoken of at Mass, but they are no less sacred. I prepare the bodies of those who die in service to the church bishops, archivists, guards, even the unnamed. I anoint their brows, bind their hands, and record their passage into silence. Our rituals are precise. They must be. Death, in this place, listens. The mortuary is beneath the Apostolic Palace, down a long corridor barred by a bronze gate engraved with Saint Joseph of Arimathea. Beyond it lie 12 sealed rooms, each numbered in Roman script above a heavy wooden door. Each door bears a wax seal marked with the cardinal's ring. When the door is opened, the seal must be broken under witness. When closed, the room is sealed again by hand with prayer and fire. We do not use room 13. That door was bricked over before my appointment. Most nights are uneventful quiet, watchful. I recite the compline and light a candle by the silver crucifix near the embalming table. The wax must burn until the sealing is complete. That night, like many, I was alone. Or, so I believed. At precisely 3:17 in the morning, the hour of examination, as we call it, I was making my rounds with the parchment ledger, logging the humidity levels in each chamber. The wax seals were all intact. The candle by the crucifix flickered only slightly when I passed room 9. Then I noticed the temperature. That corridor is always cold, but the air before door 9 was still, not frigid, not dry, still, like something had drawn the breath out of the stone. The seal was broken. It was a clean break, as if peeled by gloved hands. No fragments lay on the floor. The signet was still whole, set aside neatly on the threshold like an invitation. I stood frozen. Protocol is clear. If a seal breaks without witness, the room is to be entered and inspected immediately. The ritual for unsealing must be recited in reverse superiator, non a nobis. Said a voluntate sacra, a phrase we were told never to speak aloud unless necessary. I whispered it, trembling. The door opened with barely a sound. Inside, room 9 was empty. There was no table, no body, and yet the air held the faintest scent of chrism oil and smoke. I left the door ajar and returned to the main office to retrieve Father Dalmaso, my supervisor. When we returned together, the room remained as I'd found it. He said nothing, only resealed it himself with fresh wax and made the sign of the cross in silence. But in the morning, when I returned to prepare the body of a cardinal recently arrived from Milan, the seal on room 9 had returned, intact, pressed from the inside. I reported it again. This time, Father Dalmaso refused to accompany me. He told me to make note of it in the night log, but not to speak of it beyond that. Rooms forget things, he said. We do not. I tried to pray, but something about that door unsettled my breath. I found myself glancing down the corridor even when I was in the embalming room. The candle by the crucifix had developed a strange behavior. It would dim to near darkness at 3:17, then flare again at 3:22, exactly 5 minutes later. On the third night, I stood outside room 9 again. The seal remained intact. I knocked once. Silence. Then, on impulse or something darker, I pressed my ear to the wood. I heard soft footsteps, bare feet, shuffling slowly on stone, and then a wet exhale, as if something leaned close to the other side of the door to listen back. I stumbled away, whispering a prayer that tangled in my throat. Later that week, I reviewed the mortuary ledgers going back to 2000. Room 9 had been used frequently until 2010. Then suddenly, nothing. The line simply stops. The final entry reads, "Sealed indefinitely by order of the Secretariat. No remains stored." And yet, I had seen it open. I had stood inside it. On the night of February 2nd, the feast of the Presentation, we received the body of Bishop Gaspari, a man I had met once, briefly, in 2012. He had been the liaison to the Pontifical Secret Archive, rarely seen, often whispered about. His face, even in death, bore a half-smile that unsettled me. As I began the ritual washing, the candle beside me dimmed. I looked at the clock. 3:17. I turned my head toward the corridor. Room 9's door was open. No sound had announced it. No draft. Just open, as though it had never been closed. I should have reported it again, but something in me, something quiet and compelled, stepped forward. I took the candle, now burning pale, and approached. The room was no longer empty. A slab had returned. On it lay a body. I recognized the robes first, then the rings, then the face. My own. I cannot explain it. It was Menet as I stood, but older, paler, eyes closed in perfect peace. The linen on my chest was folded with the same care I gave to all the dead. My smile. I backed away, heart pounding, dropping the candle. But it did not go out. It rolled to the corner of the chamber and stopped. Then the body's eyes opened. They did not move. They did not blink, but they opened. And in them I saw something ancient, not unholy, but utterly knowing, as if the room itself had waited for me. I fled. When I returned with Father Dalmaso, the door was shut. The seal was whole. I no longer speak of room 9. I pass it without breath, without glance. I burn a second candle now, though I tell no one. The Vatican does not alter ritual for personal fear, but I do. Father Dalmaso never asked what I saw that night. He only left a small note inside my locker the next morning. It was unsigned, but written in his careful Latin. Some doors open once, some twice. The second is never for entry. Since then, I have noticed that the candle dimming at 3:17 has ceased. Now it never lights at all. And yet every morning it is warm to the touch. There are psalms meant only for the dead. When the living echo them from below, something has gone wrong. My name is Benedetto Alani. I have served in the mortuary chambers beneath the Apostolic Palace since the winter of 2005. My work is not spoken of publicly, nor is it listed in any official directory. Those of us assigned to the mortuary orders understand this discretion as sacred, not secrecy, but reverence. I oversee the liturgical preparation of the dead. When a clergyman passes, his body is received through a sealed corridor between the papal apartments and the sub-level crypts. There, it is I who receive him. I cleanse the remains, anoint the head and hands, wrap the body in linen according to station, and record the date and psalm spoken aloud before temporary interment. The ritual psalm for all Vatican burials, regardless of rank, is Psalm 91. Qui habitat in adjutorio altissimi. We speak it quietly. The slab must be lit by a single consecrated candle. The voice must never rise. If the lips tremble, the rite must begin again. That is the rule. One voice, measured and still. The walls are thick stone, and no sound enters from above. We do not bury, not permanently. These are only waiting places, sometimes for decades. We keep records of breath, that is to say, of words spoken into silence. On the 5th of November, 2024, I was assigned the body of Bishop Emeritus Paolo Gregori. He had died peacefully, they said, in his sleep at the Domus Sanctae Marthae. I never asked the nature of a death. If it reaches us, it has been deemed spiritually resolved. The bishop's file was odd. There was no red folder, only a wax-sealed envelope with my name in ink. Inside was a handwritten note, unsigned, that read simply, Psalm 91, in full, no substitutions. That was unusual. Some elderly clergy request Psalm 23 or Psalm 6 for penitence. But this note was firm. No substitutions. I lit the candle, placed the linen around the shoulders, and began. My voice was steady. Qui habitat in adiutorio altissimi. In protectione Dei caeli comorabitur. Then, just after verse 5, non timebis a timor nocturno, I heard it. It was not above me. It was not beside me. It came from below. It spoke the same Latin line, matching my pace exactly, but lower, cracked, as though forcing each syllable through dust. The candle shook. I froze mid-verse, and the voice did not continue without me. It stopped the moment I did. I looked down at the stone beneath my feet, the interment slab, smooth, veined marble. Beneath that, a shallow chamber for temporary rest. Nothing more. I stepped back. The air was dry, but I felt a chill under my robes, like a current moving upward through the stone. The bishop's face remained peaceful. His hands had not moved. I checked the chamber door. Sealed. My pulse had begun to race. I stood there for a full minute, waiting for something else. But there was nothing. No breath, no movement. I told myself it had been an echo. The chapel acoustics were complex. Perhaps the chamber beneath was open to a lower vent. Perhaps another mortician down the corridor, though I knew no other rites were scheduled. Still, I waited. Then I began again. Non timbis, a timor nocturno. And again, the voice joined in. Same pace, same words, from the stone. I did not finish the prayer that night. The following morning, I submitted a formal request to delay interment by 1 day, citing moisture irregularities in the vault chamber. It was a lie, of course, but one that would not raise concern. We are permitted delays for preservation. I checked the bishop's records again. Nothing of note. No odd behaviors, no previous burial requests. I began to wonder if the note had been meant for me personally. The next night, I returned. I brought a different candle from the reliquary cabinetone that had once been placed near the bones of St. Pius. I also brought a stethoscope. I say this not to sound dramatic, but to be precise. I placed the stethoscope directly on the slab. Nothing at first, just stone silence. Then I whispered the first line. Qui habitat in adjutorio altissimi. Still nothing. I reached verse 5. Non timbis, a timor nocturno. And then there it was. Muffled, distant, but undeniably there. A breath. Then the verse, in Latin, almost whispered. The pronunciation was correct, but weighted, as if the voice carried not air, but sand. A sound ancient and reluctant. I dropped the stethoscope. The candle flickered wildly, though there was no draft. I stepped back and nearly called for the guard outside the crypt hall. But what would I say? The bishop is not dead? No, that was not true. I had prepared his body. I had checked the pulse, the temperature, the rigor. He was cold, still, utterly lifeless. And yet something spoke with me. The next morning, I found my file drawer locked. That had never happened before. When I requested access, the head archivist merely looked at me and said, "Interment records are updated weekly." I told him I had performed the rites myself. He said, "Then you must have read from memory." On the third night, I made the mistake of reading the psalm to its end. The candle I used was one kept in the mortuary since the 1930s. It had a faint silver ring near its base and was used only during exhumations. I lit it. The light held steady. I read. The voice returned, matching me line for line, its tone more assured now, less strained. Still hoarse, still broken, but confident as though each repetition had strengthened it. Then I reached verse 16. Longitudine dierum replebo eum, et ostendum illi salutare meum. And the voice continued past the verse. It began to speak lines I did not recognize, words in a Latin older than Church Latin. The syntax was twisted, inflected with syllables I had only heard in pre-Gregorian manuscripts. The voice deepened, grew closer, no longer beneath, now within the slab. I tried to step back, but my body did not respond. My lips stayed parted, my jaw trembled. The candle went out. And in the dark, I felt something rise against the soles of my shoes. Not a hand, not a breath. Pressure. The slab rose a hair, not enough to tilt, but enough for sound to escape. The voice whispered one word, now in Italian, not Latin, my name, Benedetto. I stumbled back. The candle relit itself, faintly blue, and the bishop's body had turned just slightly, his face now angled toward the stone, as if listening. I resealed the chamber myself, and I did not finish the rite. Since that night, I have not recited Psalm 91. I requested reassignment to surface duties, citing vertigo in the lower vaults. It was granted without question. A week later, I received a new psalm chart. Psalm 23 was listed first, then 6, then 130. Psalm 91 had been omitted. No one mentioned the bishop again. No record exists of his arrival. The chamber he occupied was assigned a new number, The wax-sealed envelope is gone. Last night, I lit a candle in the chapel to offer silent prayers. I did not speak. And still, in the quiet, I heard the faintest echo. Qui habitat in adiutorio altissimi. But this time it did not wait for me to answer. We are not to touch the mask, not even to clean it. I am Father Leon Pirelli, a mortician assigned to the lower vaults of the Vatican crypteria, beneath the Apostolic Palace. Most of my work is silent, reverent. My duties begin after lauds and continue through the coldest hours, preparing the bodies of unnamed clergy and cataloging those interred in the sealed tombs, those who have no visitors, no legacy beyond our records. Each vault has its own inventory, its own rules. Some are climate-controlled, others are sealed by canonical order. One of my ledgers has 3 pages glued together, with instructions: do not separate. But the red ledger has only one warning worth remembering. Do not disturb Vault 8. Do not open the copper mask. Vault 8 lies behind a narrow iron door, flanked by 2 marble saints with veiled faces. Unlike the others, it contains only one body. The record lists no name, no origin, merely a date, 1872, and next to it, a Vatican stamp in red wax, long, cracked, and faded. The body itself lies on a slab of black stone, exposed but untouched by decay, face covered entirely by a smooth, sealed copper mask, not sculpted blank, as if no human features were ever known. Once a year, we dust around the slab. No oils, no direct touch, just a circular sweep with incense and holy water. The rest of the year, it is to be left in silence. I have never heard it move. I have never seen it breathe. But once, as I passed by it on a routine check, I swear I felt warmth radiating from the mask. And once more, just a week ago, when I brushed a thumb across the copper edge to test for condensation, I felt something even stranger. A faint, slow heartbeat. I did not speak of it. Not then. In the vaults, silence is safer than truth. But something shifted after that moment. First, I began waking before matins, always at the same time, 3:17. My eyes would open with no sound, no dream, no reason. Only a coldness in the air and the lingering sense that I was not alone. Then, the candles. Each night, I relight 26 votive candles throughout the mortuary wing. They burn slow and steady, each one placed by tradition, not preference. Yet I noticed that the flame beside Vault 8 began to tremble ever so slightly, even without a draft. The next evening, I timed it. From the moment I lit the flame outside Vault 8, it took 7 minutes before it began to quiver, as though responding not to air, but to something unseen inside. I returned later with another priest, Brother Matteo, under the pretense of reviewing crypt humidity. I made no mention of the heartbeat or the candle, but as we passed Vault 8, he paused. "You keep incense lit here?" he asked. "No." "Then, what is that smell?" He was right. There was something faint, not incense, not mold. It reminded me of burnt parchment or singed linen, like old vestments exposed to heat. Yet the air was still cold, still heavy. I suggested we leave. Matteo looked toward the iron door once more. His gaze rested too long on the blank copper mask. I almost told him. I should have. But I didn't. The next morning, I found a new entry in the red ledger. Same page, same faded script. Do not remain in Vault 8 past the 6th minute. It was not there before. I know this with the certainty only habit can give. The script was identical to the older hand, but the ink was newer, glossier in the lamplight. I traced it with one finger, wondering if my own mind was playing tricks. We are not immune to delusion, even in sacred roles. Still, I obeyed. That night, I re-entered Vault 8 with my pocket watch and stood precisely 6 minutes beside the slab. I said nothing. I only watched the mask. And I listened. Nothing. No sound, no movement, no voice. But in the final seconds when the 6th minute approached, I swear I saw the faintest pulse in the copper, a rhythmic rise and fall, not enough to lift it, but enough to shape the dust atop it like breath beneath silk. I left before the hand struck the 7th minute. I did not look back. That evening, I could not sleep. My quarters smelled faintly of copper, not blood, not coins, just raw, old metal. And when I checked my hands, I saw a greenish tinge near my nails. Like oxidation. I washed obsessively. It remained. Worse, I began hearing something in the liturgical silence. A second voice. Only during prayer, only when I reached certain lines. Deliver us from death, O Lord. And faintly, ever so faintly, I heard my own voice echoed back, but not from the silence. The echo was not mine. I returned to Vault 8 one final time. I do not say this lightly. It was not curiosity. It was not disobedience. It was a compulsion deeper than doctrine, something that pressed against my ribs from within, like a prayer I could not unpray. I brought no tools, only my watch. I lit the votive as usual, marked the time, and stepped inside. The vault was colder than usual. I saw my breath, but the candle behind me did not flicker. The mask lay untouched, seamless, smooth. I reached out again this time, with a single gloved hand. My fingers brushed its edge. No heartbeat this time, just stillness. I waited. 1 minute. 2. 3. Nothing. At the 4th minute, I began to pray aloud Psalm 91, our standard rite. He shall cover thee with his feathers. At the 5th minute, I heard it again. The second voice, low, cracked, with me, and under his wings shalt thou trust. It came not from the room, but from beneath the mask. I could feel it, vibrating through the copper as though it were a mouth moving silently underneath, a tongue shaping my words, a breath behind my own. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. The voice was mine but aged, slower, like a version of myself that had been waiting centuries. And at the 6th minute, I felt warmth, then moisture. The copper mask fogged, just faintly, as if from within. I staggered back. The votive behind me had gone out, but the vault remained dimly lit, not from torchlight, but from a low glow that pulsed from the mask itself, as if the copper had begun to remember fire. Then, without touch or force, the mask began to open. Not fall, not lift, but divide, seamlessly, from the center outward. There was no mechanism, no latch, only an unfolding, like petals of metal revealing something beneath. I did not see the face. I fled before the 7th minute. Vault 8 was sealed the next day, not with chains or locks, but with salt and prayer. A new entry was stamped into the red ledger in crimson wax. No entry, no prayer, no record. When I asked about it, I was told by the Cardinal Archivist that Vault 8 does not exist, that my assignments never included it, that the red ledger is a fiction, that I may be overworked. I am not overworked. I am not deluded. And yet I have not spoken of this until now. But one final thing remains. Last week, I found a new body on the intake list. No cause of death, no name. Simply labeled, returned, recontainment necessary. The body was missing. The slab was empty. But beside the listing was a copper tag. Embossed, blank, cool to the touch. And when I turned it over, there was an impression, as if something within had pressed outward. A single fingerprint. My own. Still green from oxidation. Some rooms are not forgotten, they are denied, because remembering would require explanation. I am Gianni Orsini, a Vatican Mortician assigned to the subterranean ossuaries beneath the Western archives. My work is solemn, methodical, less dramatic than people think. There are no ceremonies down here, only reverence and rules. I do not embalm, I do not weep. I catalogue, prepare, and close what remains of men once titled Monsignor, Cardinal, even Pope. I was trained in Rome, then transferred here in 2011. The Vatican's lower vaults are rarely discussed, even among clergy. They run deeper than most buildings in Europe and connect through stone tunnels no longer listed in architectural surveys. Each vault has a name, a record, and a register paper trail dating back centuries. Except the one I found last autumn. That morning, I had been assigned to re-inventory Vault 83, a storage wing containing unfinished caskets and marble nameplates. It was dusty but routine. I had lit the standard candles in the wall niches, 3 on the left, 3 on the right. I recited Psalm 91, as protocol requires before entering a wing sealed for more than 10 years. Everything was in order until it wasn't. I noticed it while cross-referencing the blueprint scrolls. A mismatch. The north wall of Vault 83 was recorded as Solidno passages, no storage. But there it was. A faint outline in the stone, like a door not yet convinced of its own existence. It bore no label, no handle, just a shallow groove down its center, dustless and warm to the touch. The Vatican has strict procedures for such things. No unsealed chamber may be entered without permission from the Pontifical Office of Sacred Interment, but the thought of walking away from it felt worse than disobedience. It felt like neglect. I pressed my hand to the groove. It yielded. The stone cracked inward with a sigh, revealing a narrow stair descending into pitch. I stood there for several minutes. There was no draft, no scent of decay, just the low thrum of something older than language. I lit my lantern, muttered the prayer again, and descended. The stairs curved counterclockwise. 24 steps. The number struck me immediately. It is the number of hours in a day, but also the number of elders in Revelation who lay their crowns before the throne. At the bottom, I found it. A room not listed in any ledger. No Latin name, no archival seal. Only coffins. 12 of them. Each identical in make pine wood, unvarnished, and each bearing the same solitary mark, a human handprint pressed into the lid from within. I backed away. Then, against all procedure, I stepped forward again. The coffins were not labeled, no date, no crest, no wax seals. Yet they were not ancient, at least not all of them. The farthest one in the corner was clearly newer. The wood had not yet darkened. The handprint on its lid looked recent, still slightly raised, as though the pressure had never been fully released. I checked my watch. 3:17 a.m. Always 3:17. The room was utterly silent, but the silence seemed shaped. I began to catalog aloud to anchor myself. Unregistered chamber. 12 pine coffins. Unknown occupants. No documentation. Possible undocumented burial site. My voice fell flat. Even the echoes seemed muffled. I considered leaving then, sealing the stair, reporting the anomaly. Instead, I opened the nearest coffin. It was empty. Not skeletal, not decayed. Empty except for a layer of dust that had not settled evenly. Something had lain here once. I opened a second. The same. But the third held something more unsettling than decay. A depression in the lining, as though something soft had lain there and left of its own volition. I froze. The wood under my feet creaked not from rot, but from pressure. There was weight above, or below. I turned to leave. The door had closed. Not slammed, not vanished. Simply wasn't where I had come in. The stair was there, but instead of 24 steps, I now counted 31. I walked them anyway. The walls were narrowing, not visibly, but I could feel the press of stone as if the chamber resented my exit. When I reached the top, the door opened again. The Vault 83 I knew awaited me, unchanged. Candles still flickered in their sconces, but I noticed something new on the inventory table. A folder. Red stamped. No title, just a wax seal in the shape of a palm. I had never seen such a seal before. Against every instinct, I opened it. Inside were 12 entries. Each bore only a date and a name. 11 names were unfamiliar. The 12th was mine. Gianni Orsini, scheduled. October 29th, 2024. I did not scream. I sat. I read the names again. Then I returned to the hidden room. I do not know why. The coffins were still there. But now, one more bore a handprint newly formed. Still warm, my own size. The lid gave a little when I touched it, as if sighing recognition. I did not open it. I whispered Psalm 91 for the dead, though no one had died yet. As I turned to leave, I felt the faintest exhale against the back of my neck. It smelled like cedar and candle ash. I submitted no report. The folder disappeared the next day. Vault 83 was sealed again. I was reassigned temporarily to the crypts under St. John Lateran. They said it was for training, though I have been in service for over a decade. No one speaks of rooms that do not appear on maps. We are taught, subtly, to inventory only what God has already counted. But I remember the stairs. I remember the way the wood bowed inward. I remember the shape of my own name written beside a date I have not yet lived. And last night again, at 3:17, I heard the faint creak of pine boards. Not in a dream, not in memory. Somewhere beneath the earth, a coffin shifts. And it remembers me. We are told never to look at the faces of certain bodies. My name is Father Salvatore Rossi, and I have served 33 years as a mortician beneath the Holy See. My duties are quiet and precise, anointing the bodies of deceased clergy, recording the rites, and preparing them for interment in the papal crypts. I work where the light does not reach stone corridors below St. Peter's, where the Vatican exhales its silence. It is not morbid work, it is reverent. We prepare the dead not only for burial, but for judgment. There are rules, of course. Every office within these walls has them. Some are canonical, others are spoken only once when you are entrusted with the keys. For me, the rule was delivered by Monsignor Caprini the day he handed me the bronze ring to Vault 3. If a body arrives with a sealed veil over the face, he said, do not remove it. Do not even lift the edge. There are some we do not see. You will know them by the red thread. That was in the spring of 1992. I obeyed that rule for over 3 decades. Until last winter. The mortuary beneath the Vatican is separated into wings. The northern crypts hold the formally interred. The western chambers are temporary. The eastern corridor, called the Red Wing, is not marked on any architectural plan, but I was given access my 5th year. That is where the bodies are taken when death comes with questions. Unnamed clerics, unidentified pilgrims, those who died during investigation or while under censure. It is also where I first saw the veiled bodies. The coverings are always linen, stitched along the sides with red thread. There are no names, no death certificates. I am to record only the date of delivery, the weight, and the prayer completed. One such body had been in Chamber 7 for several years. We do not embalm these. We do not touch them after placing them within the climate vault. We light a candle outside their drawers and recite a weekly Psalm 91, if possible. Sometimes the candle flickers out during the prayer. That is always noted. I say all of this so you understand I knew the procedure. I had followed it longer than most priests serve a parish. The rule was not hard to keep, not until the morning the seal broke. It was the first week of Advent. The temperature in the Red Wing had dropped sharply cold enough that the brass cross above the drawer showed a thin rim of frost. When I opened it to inspect, I saw that the veil had loosened. Just slightly, a tear near the temple. The red thread had snapped, as if from within. I did not panic. I assumed cold and time had strained the seam. I said my prayer. I recorded the tear. But I returned at midnight. I cannot explain why. Perhaps it was pride, curiosity disguised as clerical concern. Perhaps I wanted to see if the rumors were true, that some of those veiled are not dead in the way we understand, that they are only held. I did not bring a light. I knew the wing well enough to walk it blind. The red wing holds only 16 drawers, all deep within the stone. The air was different that night. Still, but not silent. There was a sound like distant breath, or a hand pressed softly to the vault walls. I approached drawer 7. The candle was out, not recently extinguished, cold to the touch, with the wax stiff. And the drawer was open. Only an inch, but enough to see that the veil had fallen completely from the head. I stood there for some time. I whispered the Sanctus 3 times. My hands shook. I was about to close the drawer and pretend I had never seen it when I leaned forward. I looked, and the corpse looked back. Its eyes opened, not with life, but with recognition. I cannot say it blinked. I cannot say it breathed. A knowledge that passed from its gaze into my soul and settled there. It looked at me with sorrow, not menace, not accusation, a deep, impossibly old sorrow. I stumbled back. My spine struck the opposite wall. I dropped the veil trying to lift it. The corpse did not move again. I sealed the drawer. I left the wing. I vomited in the basin outside the Chapel of Tears. I did not record the incident. For 3 days, I did not descend to the Red Wing. I performed rites in the northern vaults. I assisted a visiting bishop with preparations in the chapel of Leo the Great. But on the 3rd night, I received a note. Folded. No signature. You saw it. So did I. Come at 3:17. The time was not a surprise. 3:17 a.m. is when the most irregularities occur. That is when doors swell slightly in their frames, when certain candles glow blue, when sounds beneath the crypts become rhythmic like chanting. I returned. I brought the key. Chamber 7 was lit. I do not mean a lamp or candle. I mean that light issued from the stone itself, faint, like reflected moonlight, but without a source. There was a man there, an older priest, in full cassock, thin, silent, still. I did not see his face. He did not turn. I started to speak, but he raised one hand, not in warning, more like absolution. And then he opened the drawer. The body inside looked unchanged, but there was something else now, a second veil, this one black. He placed it gently over the face. He stitched it not with thread, but with hair, his own, I believe, cut silently from the back of his head, each hair drawn through the cloth by a bone needle. When he was done, he looked toward me. He said only, "We look only once." Then he left. I do not know where. I do not know his name. I returned the next morning. The chamber was dark. The drawer was sealed. The record now bore a new line. Second veil placed. Do not disturb. It was in my own handwriting, but I had not written it. Since then, I have obeyed. I do not look, even when the candles go out, even when I hear my name breathed behind the drawers. There are 7 veiled bodies now. Sometimes, I think I see movement beneath the cloth, a rise, a turn of the jaw, but I do not investigate. Once, last month, the door to the Red Wing was open when I arrived. I stood at the threshold. I could see only darkness inside. And I felt something watching me, not with threat, but with sorrow. I closed the door. I said nothing. There is no confession for what I saw, no penance, I trust. But sometimes, when I kneel in the Chapel of Tears, I see a folded note beneath the pew. Always the same line. We look only once. And I know I was not the first, and will not be the last.